On this episode of the Construction Dorks, we continue what we're calling our FreeTO project. Real conversations with current and future CTOs to pull back the curtain on what it really takes to be a construction CTO. The wins, the losses, the lessons learned, and the stories nobody tells you going in. For this one, though, it was just the dorks. We needed to get out our rants before we made room for other guests. So, this is one of those.
And we're live. Minus Jeff Sample, but live with How to CTO Volume 2 with the Dorks. We've got Travis, John, and myself, Trent Leinenbach. We're gonna continue the rant on how to be a CTO in trade contracting. I think one thing I wanted to preface as we move into kind of the second rant on this topic, just so everyone knows that this is a rant. This is a discussion. Hopefully nobody out there thinks that any of this is really scripted or prepared for in any way other than just kind of knowing the topic. And, it's really just a chance for us to kind of get together and, just kind of express our opinions. And I think we've got some really interesting past experiences and perspectives on the topic. And hopefully the information provides value to someone and maybe somebody out there will elevate their career or elevate their purpose or, find themselves moving into something that they really feel like it should be their direction. And if we can buy a couple people that with this short little ranted series we put together, then I feel like we've done our jobs. But
and we got a lot of feedback. Like it was kind of like being at a conference and giving a class. You know how you give the class and then like 9 people call you and point out the holes? Like people were calling me and I was getting emails and they're like, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And I will say almost all of those people, it's like, yeah, we're gonna invite you on as we sort of dig into this subject a little bit deeper and look at it. But like one of the things that came up that I thought was really weird, and it may be just a little off subject, but was one of them came back and they're like, well, don't you need a business degree to really be a CTO? And I for a second I was like, no, of course not. Most of the CTOs I know don't have a business degree. I think Pikey's got a physics degree. Not that he's necessarily a CTO, but like a lot of them come from what we do. And you kind of need that background of understanding all of the software at such a deep level and sort of the workflows at such a deep level. I think it would be easier to give somebody like sort of the MBA style understanding of finance and sort of coaching. Like I actually reached out to James Simpson. I said, why do you think, a CTO would need to be an MBA? And he's like, it's got to just be the financial stuff. It's got to be the economics, because that's not something that you're going to touch outside of that. But go for it.
I would liken it to, like we've talked about a lot on our podcast about bringing tradespeople into BIM, right? It's easier to teach them Revit than it is to teach them to trade. I think this would be the similar thing. Like it's easier to work with your CFO or your controller or whoever it is on that end on the financial side to understand your portion of it, because you don't need to understand the entire. You need to have. I should rephrase that. You need to have an overview of the entire business, right, in the financial side of it, but you don't. You're only concerned on your own budgeting end and how you're managing the finances of that part. You don't need to have that finance degree. And I don't have a degree, and I think I've made it fairly far in life, despite that. So I think that there is something to be said for having the right people in the right position at the right time. The degree, and we've all talked ad nauseum, like the degree these days doesn't. They're good to have. I don't want to diss anybody that has one, but they're not necessarily the end all be all.
Yeah, I think the world's kind of waking up to that a little bit. I mean, that's becoming way more prevalent today. Like, I mean, I know people that like it's I don't want to say it's seen as a negative, but I know hiring managers out there that don't even see it as an advantage at all. I mean, it depends on what you're doing, right? But
yeah, I'd like my doctor to have a medical degree.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Luckily, there's credentialing in the way of things like that. But like, you don't need an MBA to run a financial vertical in a P&L, like, I mean, a profit loss center. Like, you Like, you don't need an MBA to do stuff like that.
I also think there's that. So if you're in a sort of an executive environment where everybody's got an MBA, that's kind of a closed club. Like, I know with my journey to be a CTO, I had to get really good at communicating all of my ideas down through everybody. And I feel like a lot of the closed C-suites on the larger companies aren't doing a great job of that. You go into their meetings where they're talking about technology, they're throwing around so many insider acronyms and really not explaining themselves. I've been in somewhere, I'm like looking at the executive and going, I don't think you know all the acronyms you just threw at me, because they weren't necessarily used right. Where I feel like the people that come up through, they started out at some position within the contractor and then have worked their way up to CTO. I think they already know the technology. They're already kind of in love with the technology, and they've been having to sell that stuff at every step of the way. So when they get to the C-suite, they can just as easily tell the C-suite about it as turn around and sell the office. And I think that barrier, I mean, it's not a digital divide like on a job site, but there's a divide between the C-suite's understanding of technology and the overall contractor understanding. I think that's part of the CTO's job, is to be able to go up to the C-suite and go, you're looking at these all as programs. We need to look at them differently because now we're pretty much running your company with not people.
But right.
Like, don't you see it?
I do.
It's not really a vertical on its own, though. Like, I mean, when you get to that level and you talk about C-suite people who run business verticals within a company, there's a competitive nature there of like which vertical is more profitable, and I mean, there's a lot of competition, and rightfully so. But a CTO kind of has a vertical, but he also kind of has a horizontal, like across there's a little bit more to it. So, I mean, I just don't know if the game's the same.
That's a really good point. CTO is a supportive position for a lot of those verticals. So how do you make room for that? Because also, like under engagement with the CTO was a problem with me. Like I had everybody engaged except for I had one little group. I'm not going to blame them, Sprinkler, but like that wouldn't necessarily like get behind all that. And that was actually a big problem, because I can't be effective at what I'm trying to do, which is to say, here's the value I'm giving you for the money you're spending on all this technology. If I got also to say, well, yeah, except for in this one vertical where they're not using it, and I'm still spending the money, but like it's not getting used.
Well,
So
I think
it is more
that's a
collaborative.
conversation that you do have to have with the other counterparts, though. Is that was when I was doing my role, is I would hit those pockets of resistance inside the company and be like, okay, well, then I guess you don't also get the benefits, right? And you have to be able to relate that. When we were talking through like all the intricacies just a second ago, I was trying to come up with a sports analogy, and I was thinking like the coach, is the CTO the coach of your technology stack? But I'm more feeling like it's a athletic director, right? You're kind of sitting over all these different parts and pieces and trying to keep them all working in coordination. I don't know why that just popped into my head, but it is difficult. And John, you had showed out a kind of a mind map of when you were trying to make a case to have a CTO position, and obviously try to make the case for yourself in that position, like all the pieces that you mapped out that you touched.
Yeah, and that was a big part of, I think that's a big part of like for anybody out there that wants to be a CTO, having a written visible plan that you can share with others. Like, this is where I'm trying to get to, and this is how I'm trying to get there. There's no way for people to help you if they don't know how to help you. And I really did kind of leverage a bunch of like, I mean, I'm not going to show it on the show or post it because it has little money things by it. Like, this is my contractor at this amount of money, and this is my contractor at that amount of money.
We
But
might
like,
be able to scrub a version of it to share.
yeah, it might be worth it because it's not complex at all. It's not like some huge map. It's just like I want to get this done by the end of next year, and I think a big part of it, of me being able to have a little bit more freedom financially to make the investments I wanted, was they saw where it was going, and if I didn't get there, they also saw that. Like they saw I was pretty good about sharing when I failed, because I did fail fairly often. But Trent, I think you hit something that's very important. Is each one of those vertical managers, each one of the division managers or the managers of the vertical is responsible for a piece of what the CTO would take over if you had a CTO, right? So if you had a CTO, every single manager is going to have something taken off their plate that is not their expertise and is going to move into something that is their expertise. Where would you, Trent, where would you throw that in terms of executives? Because that there isn't a great I can't think of a great acronym or a great example. I mean, I think you're right, Travis. I think the athletic director, but like in a normal contractor, what does that look like?
Yeah, it becomes like I said, it's a vertical and a horizontal, and I don't normally I have good analogies, but I'm not sure I can think of them. But you're right. There are these roles
Lack
and
of bourbon.
responsibilities of like if you take a swim lane that has, someone who's head of fabrication or someone who's head of external projects, or I mean, you're looking at all these different. There's probably like a service arm, like all these different profit loss verticals of a contractor. Somebody in that role, and it's likely someone near the top, is contract managing tech stack. They're managing the contracts for some of their tech stack. There's certain processes that they have to do. There might be like training, certain training things they've got to coordinate. I mean, the tasks are being done by someone. It would probably be interesting to map that out a little more formally and kind of see who all is. But you're almost segmenting like some of that work out of there, and you're like horizontally moving it to another vertical. And then now this individual kind of manages like what are the what is the tech stack that each of these individual or vertices, all the common ones, like what's the tech stack they're using, who's going to manage the contracts around those, and who's in charge of adoption and implementation and compliance around all those individual pieces of technology. And it's not just software. That's probably a lot of hardware too, I would imagine. I feel like there's going to be quite a bit of hardware that would fall under the CTO's breadth as well. What I'm trying to, and John, you can probably speak from experience a little on it too, but I'm imagining the hardware that would fall in there would be like, workstation computers. You're going to have stuff like that probably move over, whether it's CTO, CIO, some kind of leg there. But then, when you think of the job site, we have like the robotic total stations and scanners. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's so much of it. I mean, does it cover like some of the capital investment pieces too? Like what we call advanced tooling, and I mean, what all do you think really gets grabbed there?
So I think that when I originally went in, I said that a construction technologist was the manager of your digital workforce. So like just like you have a manager of labor for human labor, you had a manager of labor for digital labor, and that was your construction technologist. They knew all of your working technologies that weren't just IT, which I considered support technologies, more like general environment, where the construction technologist was managing your digital manpower. So I got normal manpower managed, digital manpower managed. Where I wanted to go to CTO is the IT piece of it. IT isn't typically on a C-suite other than the CIO or something like that. They've started to put IT on there because they're like, wait, IT is actually a profit center that stretches underneath all these verticals. So I think for me, like the construction technologist was that first piece that like, can I manage all of their digital assets that are working on the jobs? And then the next step for me was, can I have the authority to tell IT to get out of my way? Because you put a great point out there. We had a situation where IT was telling us what computers to buy. And I'm like, no. My Revit, which works for me, like Revit works for me, okay, and Windows works for me, and Word and Bluebeam work for me. So if they're working really slow because the PC is slow, then you're screwing with
Yeah.
me. Like I need a better PC. I should
Yeah.
manage that
And
PC.
those
Anybody
are,
out there wants to argue in today's world that that like the use of a computer is not operational technology? I don't
Yeah.
I question your
well,
mindset a little bit.
but that's where I would say that I where I was thinking with the CTO, I don't know necessarily goes into workstations, but you do have to have that good working relationship with
Yeah.
your IT director or CIO if it doesn't fall under your purview because of those things. When I think of CTO, I do think more of that kind of that operational tech, the total stations. If you get a spot, if you get in my world, if you're doing some advanced manufacturing in the sheet metal shop, like maybe you don't own the laser, the plasma or whatever, but you own the part of that process to get the data out there. Um, so those are the kinds of things that I always thought it touched on. But to your earlier point, like if it doesn't run Revit, IT, sorry, you're buying us the wrong shit. And you have to be kind of, I think Jonathan, you said the position of authority. You have to be in that position of authority to be like, no, your Dell 486 is not cutting it for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also think if you don't have a CTO, and I think the construction technologist again usually does this piece, and until they run into roadblocks or need the authority of being a CTO, but who has the vision for where you're going technologically? Like these software used to do point solutions, so you could have an accounting solution that was separate from your operations solution that's separate from your, now most of the software wants to kind of own the world. So when you're pulling in a piece of software, you're not pulling in a piece of software for one division or one vertical. And I think that again is like doubles down. If you're pulling in, you're hiring digital help, digital workforce for multiple verticals, you need to have somebody to manage that, or at least to do the selection that has a
And if
vision
you are
for
in
it.
all these verticals, we bitch all the time inside of our own projects about data silos. If you are on all these
Yes.
verticals, why would you want to continue to create different fiefdoms and silos there? Like, I am not one for centralized power and authority unless where it makes sense. And this is one of those cases where it makes sense. Again, probably when you hit a certain size of corporation, like yeah, when it's two guys in a truck, they probably don't need a CTO. But when you do hit that certain size and you do have multiple branches that are engaging with technology, it makes sense to make sure it all works together and they're all pulling the rope.
Let's and I can from some of my experience too. I mean, I can speak to what you observe and why this model makes sense to me. And I think you two will probably agree, and hopefully people listening do. But that tech stack, and whether it's software or hardware, there's a point where it needs to be by committee. And and that's kind of what the CTO can do. It's the authoritative way to run that committee. I mean, let's take an ERP, for example. I bet 95, probably even greater than 95% of the trade contractors out there, who selects the ERP, right? It's the
Accounting.
CFO. Or,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so that happens like all the time. And I mean, I've seen it in so many organizations but like, where's the bulk of the bulk of what operates in an ERP is like on project management, like there's this whole operational front of what an ERP is. And like, I would argue where the rubber meets the road, way more dollar signs or of labor is being spent on that front than any financial division. So why is the financial division picking that piece of software to fit the needs of 5 individuals versus the needs of 50 or 100? Or so that's, part of, I think, the CTO's responsibility is to rein that in and be like, no, like I'm not saying we won't go with what you want, CFO. That is very much in the running,
Right.
but understand that we've got a lot of other P&L verticals over here that have to leverage this product that we need to consider.
If we don't pick the right product, then we're losing money on jobs. You have less money to account in your accounting. Like so, it kind of makes the ERP irrelevant if the projects aren't going well.
And I think they don't know. Like, I mean, I've worked with ERPs where they're like, oh, use the project management solution that's linked with this ERP. And you start to use it and you're like, this is going to
Yeah.
cost us so
Maybe
much
you
money.
don't need to, though. Maybe that's my point. Like, now maybe you do. Maybe
Yeah.
the ultimate decision is to go that route, but you need someone to head that up and have that vision. And like tooling, stuff like that, I think goes along the same lines.
Yep.
Like when I was in construction technology, Um, I sought out and contracted a piping profiler for my organization. And I think that's where it belongs, because it's not just about the needs of the fab shop anymore. There's
Right.
interoperability. There's a lot of, now you have to work with the fabrication vertical. You have to work with the virtual design vertical. You have to work with the project management like all of, like I said, there's a committee involved but that's where that horizontal ability of the CTO to go across there really helps, because this isn't serving one business entity anymore.
Yep.
It's like, well, the fab shop should choose what pipe cutter they want. Okay, kinda, yes,
Kinda.
but,
Yeah. Right. But it needs to fall within these parameters so that we can make sure it works with the rest of our business.
like they definitely have an input that's important. It's like, my fabrication team is going to tell me the type of work that needs to be done on this machine, right? So there are certain parameters that I need to take into consideration to fulfill, their business leg. But I also need to get with virtual design and all the other and make sure that the interoperability of all the other things we're doing can feed information to this machine. And so you've got to make the best decision with everybody's wants and needs.
Yeah, and there has to be somebody weighing that. I do think I think the thing that was a bummer for me was
don't rely on the provider. Don't rely on the
provider.
Right.
Unless it's Trent. If it's Trent, rely on him.
Right.
But other than that, just don't provide. But like, I feel like there's a lot of sort of space between when you're just managing the technologies and when you're managing the money behind and responsible for the technologies. So I do feel like that was a big piece that people are missing when I actually remember sitting down behind a person who does BIM, and they were talking about all the money they were making for this company because of the BIM work they were doing. And I was like, you have no idea what our costs are for what you're doing. It's like, well, this is how much, and I am an hour and this is how much we're getting paid. And I was like, and this is our building, and this is our computer, and this is your software, and this is the materials, and this is and I think there is definitely a need for that wider understanding. And usually when I see people fail at making it CTOs because they didn't spend the time, it's kind of going out there and saying, what does everybody else need to know before I can take over this position? Like where do they need to be comfortable with me at before they'll give me the authority to do this?
Is that like a day one thing on Jonathan Marsh's plate? If John Marsh comes in today as CTO of Trent Leinenbach Mechanical, right? Like, is that a day one? Is day one mapping out the tech stack, mapping out getting I feel like I'm leading a little bit to what you're going to say, but it's like you have to get an understanding, right?
Yeah, but your workforce, like if you were coming in to do a workforce, the first thing you do is go meet all your employees, right? Like you're managing a workforce. So like go meet all your employees, make sure you know your employees and what they're doing. And that's why that tech stack that I teach at the MCA looks like a damn org chart. Cause it is. It's the org chart for how you do things. Like that's our workforce. That's where we're going to make our profit margin. I do think like what shocked me was the amount of process you had to do, because while I do that now and very good at that now, when I started, that wasn't one of my favorite things to do. In fact, that may have been the least favorite. I remember swearing at Sean McGuire for hours and hours and hours as I filled out details on the MCA's project or VDC project lifecycle. It's like, why does he need to know what this person does? And I got to call 3 of these guys.
But I think
valuable. It's valuable.
I was going to say it's very important, because if you do come in day one and they're like, we use this PM system, we use this BIM to fab system, we use this BIM, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's a tech stack, but what do you use them for? If you don't get the what they're for and what the process is, you don't really get a full understanding of the way things flow through the company. And it is, I mean, it can be very tedious, and you're going to find Excel everywhere, and you got to kind of figure out where that fits and how to rein that in. But the process, I think the processes is probably almost, if not more important than the digital person you have in the place. Like if you're using that digital screwdriver to hammer nails, well, we need to have a conversation there.
And is what people are doing, isn't it? It's like when you go in and you actually do a tech stack for people and put it in front of them, they're like, we're using the same program to do like 6 different things here, but here's 2 guys that are using a different program to do the same thing. Like there is no cohesiveness without, I don't know if it's a CTO or a construction technologist, but I feel like there's no cohesiveness without that position. It's just a bunch
Yeah.
of like small
Well,
companies.
yeah, and I think that the way that we're discussing about it in this little series we're creating is the argument of making your CTO out of your construction technologist because they're going to have most of those details. Now, the hard part, as you were talking about when you mapped out what you were all in charge of before you became CTO, is decoupling what they've done in the past and putting somebody back in charge of all that because the CTO is not going to ascend to that executive level and still go make sure that fucking label printer works in the fab shop. I hope.
Yeah. It wasn't that one of the struggles you
Sounds
had?
like that came from a point of passion.
Yeah, I was going to say. We always talk about not having to take care of our own babies. I mean, that's
Right.
like if you have a super of all your labor, do you expect them to manage what they're doing on the job site every day? Of course not. You manage where those people are deployed. And that's what we manage. Where's that technology deployed? The day-by-day management has to be somebody else. We're never going to get anywhere.
Right.
So
Yeah,
the, so the selling point of a CTO versus like a VDC manager slash contact person is the ability to move away from the foreman on a ladder, right? I mean, this is like admitting as an organization that we're taking this very seriously, and we're actually going to put someone in charge of the strategy, the budget, basically. But in a contractor world, it's kind of great because that's like one neck to choke at that point, right? I mean, like you kind of have to. You kind of have to set that up. Like there's a. I mean, it's your job to get that done now, right? When the argument before was always, well, I would have, but I had 50 hours of VDC work to do every week, so.
well, that's something that we'll go way back in the James Benham day. That's what he always said, and that's something that my bosses at the Helm Group took to heart was if it's important enough, you put somebody in charge of it. It becomes their job. Sometimes it's hard to define what that job is if it's never existed before, but you gotta work through
Well,
that.
I think that's a good topic. I think, John, we were going to hit on that a little bit. Is like there's got to be a method to kind of tease this or pre-sell it, right? For certain people. I wanted to go into more of like what's the day one, week one, month one, year, quarter one, year one of John Marsh, but I think the story begins before day one.
Oh yeah.
I think we've got a lot of people out there that see this as a viable position in an organization, but like how do you market that and sell it? And then, I guess 2 things you got to convince an organization of. 1, they need a CTO, and 2, it should be you, right? I guess that is
Right.
the goal of the first date's to get a second
I've got a
date.
great idea. We need to hire a CTO. I'd like to apply for the position.
And how do we do it without sounding, like that, right?
Yeah.
But so I think there is like an internal sales pitch you've got to put together, and maybe one of the angles, like we just talked about, was that process mapping. Like maybe you don't have an operations manager, or maybe you have an operations manager that's so into other things that they don't have a process map, or maybe you is that a wedge in? Like, hey, I think we can get this done, or there's got to be some strategies for people to elevate and sell that.
I think that's something we should ask every guest. Like when we have a CTO that comes on, the first thing would be like, how did you sell that? I think I got really lucky in that at the time technology was really dialing in. So we were getting a lot of awesome solutions. So I kind of got elected by the people that were using those technologies. We had a guy out on an industrial site who used to complain at ends about BIM all the time until we didn't give him BIM on a job. And then he instantly called back up and was like, no, I want it. I just want to be able to bitch about it. I would like this because then I'm not responsible for it, but I would like to be able to bitch about it also. And I think that's the progression that I see a lot of people take is if they stop doing VDC just long enough to start helping everyone else, now all those people that you're helping start to become that mob that starts to elect you, because I do think that like really huge firms tend to select a CTO. I think smaller firms tend to elect a CTO before they're a CTO. Like everybody, and there was no question about who you come to ask the technology question ahead of time. And I feel like that should be the case. Like everybody should already know that's what you do before you're going up to ask them. And the best way to do that is just like, we have some killer technology to save people time, make people's lives not
Well,
suck.
I have a question then that I'll throw back to the you two then. So if you've worked your way into this point, and I'm asking this from both a little bit of experience, personal side, and then just talking to other people. What happens if you've worked yourself into the position, you are that person, but the reply back to your question about having a CTO is, well, you're basically that anyway. What would be a good response then? Because is it is and again, a lot of this does depend a lot on corporate structure, right? Some corporations are just not set up to have that particular role. But um, is it okay to consider yourself a CTO without the title? And talking around it there a little bit. But do you
It
understand what I'm
probably
getting at?
is. It probably is, but I guess like if I had to craft a rebuttal to something like that, I would probably come up with a vision of things that the company could get to through technology and a lot of the things you would map out probably have come up in meetings or counselings and one-on-ones and leadership calls and stuff like there's probably people hear about tech, right? And it's probably come up. So I would talk a lot about like a lot of the stuff that's out there as a vision and then pull it back and talk about like, well, here's what we've actually gotten done with me in that role ish, now. It's like, and then I think from there you've got to sell that if you strip the other half of my role away and let me work on this, like this is what we can do. Does that make sense? Like I think it needs to be more eloquent than how I just said it,
Yeah.
but or it needs to be way more documented and clear. But it's like, yeah, here's all the stuff we talk about. We've done 20% of what we talk about. What if I could promise you we can do 80% of what we talk about? Or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a lot of reason that I made those like sort of vision boards for each year is part was accountability, but part that I can tell you that I actually got that answer. They're like, well, they know you do that anyways, and I was like, well, then why not call me what I am? Like I'm not asking for some huge raise. I'm asking for a change in title. And legitimately, he said, why would that help you? And I said, you know what? That opens doors immediately. I said, right now, if I
Right.
tell somebody something, they go to you because you're the CEO. If the CTO sells them something, they go to the CTO, or you could say, that's not a CEO job. That's a CTO job. And I think as soon as you say that you can take those questions that you can't answer off of their desk, now there's a reason for them to make you a CTO, because most CEOs have too much to do anyways. Like, or our CEO was very hands-on. Our CEO estimated, managed jobs, did all of these things. So offering them the opportunity to not be authoritative on something was not something that they recoiled from. But also, I have to say, I lucked out in that where I was at, the idea of the bigger, better idea was like culture. Like you constantly had people coming up to you and talking about how to try to do something better. I don't even know. It was almost like a competitive culture where there was no competitor that you were looking at. Because every time, man, it'd be like, they had the bigger, better deal idea before I ever got there. So when I got there, they were like, well, can we do this better? And as a technologist, you're like, hell yes, we can. Here's all of the stuff. But to your point, if they ask, well, why do you need it if people already treat you that way? It's like, well, why don't I have it? Like, what are you afraid of? But seriously, what are you afraid of? Because I think there's a level at which knowing what they're afraid of or why they're holding back will help you understand what you need to do in order to get to that seat. I do think, though, that it can also be uncomfortable because you're running a big part of their business, so they know they have to keep you semi-happy, right? We do have a lot of situations in which the technologists within companies tend to walk away, and I do think that's because there's not a CTO made available to them.
that's
I
a
think,
good topic too.
Yeah.
yeah,
I think we should hit on the fact that if you want to elevate to that position internally and you are wearing 47 hats, you have to backfill, right? I mean, the onus is on you not only
yes,
to sell the
Right.
position,
yeah,
but you've got to, I think like one thing you have to do for your organization is you have to at least have a backfill plan to keep them afloat in what you're doing. To like, you
Right.
can't throw the burden on them, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just go there and like, hey, you should promote me to the C-suite and everything's going to be great.
yeah, and then like, all
Ooh,
right, great, yeah,
I'm going to sit in my office and think all day. No, you do have to have that. When I'm CEO, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to put these people in place. If we don't have them internally, you do have to be able to, as part of your sales pitch, to be like, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it.
yeah. So and
It,
so has shown a lot of promise. He'll step up and take over this, and I mean, like, there's got to be some kind of like map that gives them confidence that like they're not gonna, because chances are if you're in that seat, you're probably an A player at what you do. I mean, I think there's a good chance of it. So you've got to sell the fact that something's not going to burn when you walk away from it. You know.
Dude, that was the biggest mistake I made too, Trent. And so I did that. I like figured out who I needed to backfill, and then I started backfilling. But I didn't think that you still have to connect them all. Like you're wearing 20 hats, but you are wearing 20 hats. So there's a connection there. And I didn't like I backfilled, but I didn't backfill to the point where if you pull that connection out, everything still works. And I felt really like you don't notice when you're there, but I would say that if you are somebody that's like about to make this jump and you are the only connective tissue between all these people you backfilled, figure out where they're supposed to circle up if you were to get hit by the beer bus this week. And you know, I joke around with my poor assistant Eli, like, what do we do if I get hit by a car tomorrow all the time? Because I don't because I feel like I really did screw that up. I replaced all the people that I needed to replace so I could have that freedom. But then when I needed to step away, I hadn't replaced the sort of leadership or the connective piece or leadership piece. And I think you can do that easily by setting up committees with new committee chairs where you're just like, okay, well, it's a committee and I'll elect a new chair rather than I just one mess up that I guarantee you a lot of people are making. Please, 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 if you feel like there's any chance you're going to get hit by the beer bus, set up a committee too, so that there's a chairperson that's going to fill in from a leadership standpoint when you're not there. So you know who it is, they understand where you're going, spend some more time with them. I did a poor job of that.
Yeah,
That for the social piece.
as an experienced team builder myself, I will say a good way to make sure you're set up for that too is to make sure you're building small functional teams.
Right.
Like that you have to create the verticals in your vertical. So if you're managing teams in a virtual design or wherever you are, but you're looking at this overlap into more of a technology role, make sure you're setting up small functional teams, because that's how team structure allows for people to elevate and for people to exit. Like just the whole concept of it allows for people to move up or to get out. And if you don't have that in place, if you don't have that move up or get out lever to pull by using small functional teams, you're going to be in trouble. So make sure if you have a bunch of virtual designers that work for you, let's say you have 30 of them, that'd be a big department. Make sure you've got like 10 teams of 3 or this many teams of 4. And then by the time you get this, and then if you have 4 or 5 teams of 3, well, there needs to be a manager of those 4 or 5. You've got to have a structure where people can move up or get out, and because otherwise you will never move up or get out.
Or you will just get out.
Well, yeah.
I would say this about the getting out though. Like the one thing I hear from CEOs that I think they get wrong is they think it's money. And I don't think I wasn't trying to be a CTO to get more money. I needed authority. I had things I wanted to do. I wanted to do this with this company, and I can't do it unless you give me something. You know, and I go for it.
I was just going to say, it was, yes, we all appreciate being, rewarded for our work and money is a great way to do it.
For
But,
sure.
I think that we all know construction, you can make a good living at. And once you kind of hit that certain point, what is it? Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. Like
Yeah.
once my slightly better than, basic needs are met financially, where, I kind of, yes, again, a nice bonus is nice, but there's more that I want out of my career.
yeah, you hit a level in life where it's not, yeah, like I can agree. You get to a point where it's more about like, how do I trade my time doing things I value? And think like,
Right.
yeah, the money becomes, I think in a young career, money is pretty important. I mean,
Right.
obviously
Right.
you've got to get to a level of, where you're comfortable and you can provide and, do the whole American dream and do all the things you want to do. But then after that, it's like, it's more about personal satisfaction. And for some people, personal satisfaction is more money. They will end up being very entrepreneurial and.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, personal satisfaction is not money. It's showing up and providing value in a topic you're passionate about, and I mean, so there's a lot to it. Money is very important, but there's a whole cohort of people where there is that point where you've got enough, and now it's
Right.
more about how do I just become the person I want to be, which is
I
doing the
love how
things
you
I.
call it trading time, right? I am because my at a certain stage in most people's lives, the time is what's important. So what am I trading
Mhm.
my time for?
You're 100% trading time. I mean, that's all it is. And if you're trading time doing things you don't want to do, then at the beginning, that's fun. I always say like when when you're young, dumb, and maybe short on cash,
Right.
that's fun. You
Yeah.
trade time doing things you don't want to do all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're a little older and you're a little wiser, and cash is not a problem, and you're trading time doing something you don't want to do, that doesn't sound right. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to do that anymore. So
Right.
Yeah.
it's,
I just think I think if your only goal is financial, you're gonna have to hire a CTO with vision underneath you, even if you are the CTO, because like your vision is going to be
yeah, I
about
would
your
agree.
future and money. It's not going to be about the
Right.
company's future and building cool stuff. I mean, I think the best part about my life as a CTO was not the CTO part. It was some of the jobs I got to build. Like I got to build some really challenging, screwed up jobs that like that were virtualized at cool levels, and got to work on refineries and got to do point burst scanning. Like you get in a lot of opportunities for cool adventures in your career. But yeah, certainly the money part has to be there first. I would say though, if the money part's the only part, they're going to have to hire somebody for the passion and the vision, and that shouldn't be a separate person. Um,
Right.
and if you're hiring somebody from outside that's an MBA, you're getting a money person. You're getting an economist to run CTO versus somebody that's in your business, passionate about your business, wants to have a vision for your business. Not that you can't hire from outside. Hire somebody that's been in construction that has a vision for construction, though, because it's going to take a while to get a good vision for construction. It's not an easy subject. Like I think people underestimate every single contractor I've ever met. Like, and I think the contractors take total advantage of it and
Oh, for
sort
sure.
of say dumb stuff that I know they don't believe. And and then they walk away and you have some conversation, like you said, Travis, about this 900 books that they read in the last 3 months that they're not talking to anybody about because I think very much so the people inside of contracting are underestimated in terms of how smart they are, how rangy they are, and how fast they can adapt to new. Because that's all they've been doing, man, is adapting. These are
I couldn't
mission
agree
critical
more.
people.
I
Range.
think I
Range.
think
We got to bring that up more often.
our industry has incredible range. Yeah, I firmly believe that. Um, well, heck, man, this was awesome. I think we've saved the day one, week one kind of thing for maybe for the next so.
Yeah.
I think uh, we'll hopefully aim to bring some guests in too and kind of continue this conversation. But I'm glad we tackled a little bit of the like the prereq yourself before you see tech o yourself. Yeah. Yeah. So, but
Yeah.
that was a good conversation, and obviously for the people who listened to the first one and this one being volume two, reach out and give us your feedback, and I think we'll continue these for a while
I do hope
until
to.
we hear people tell us to shut up, and
Right.
then we won't.
Well, I was gonna say I definitely want to continue these. I know we're kind of known for our rants and raves, and if you've ever been to any of my presentations, they're very much they start scripted and they end very unscripted. I do think that I would like to get us some guests on. Please please reach out. I would love to see maybe some guest articles, some guest blogs or something put together. Because I do think that in the three of us involved in the associations we're involved in, that this is a topic of conversation everywhere. And I don't know if we can put together some sort of manual, but I do think that we can kind of do an ad hoc, you know, ground up guidebook for folks that are talking want to learn more about this
Yeah.
subject.
And the guest blogs, all that too. Yeah, that'll earn you an executive producer credit on
That's
the
right.
yeah. We're open to having more producers of this show and not just be the 3-4 of us ranting all the time. So
A lot of construction dorks out there.
Yes, there are.
all right. Well, having said all that, this was the How to CTO Volume 2, and hopefully you all enjoyed the rant, and stay tuned for the next one, which should be, 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
take care out there.
Bye bye.
But